Hey, folks. Welcome back to the Hermit's Lamp podcast. Way back in December of 2021, I declared that I was done podcasting. I was super burned out on everything, as many people were at that time, and it was increasingly difficult to not find people that I want to talk to, but find people who had any bandwidth for having conversations. People were just really overwhelmed and not looking to do stuff. I just decided to shut it down. But here we are. It's now, when I'm recording this, December of 2024. So 3 years later. And I'll tell you, over the last month or two, the bug has really gotten to me. I'm like, I really need to get back to podcasting. And of course, I decided that the first episode should be getting the band together. So today we're going to hang out with Stacking Skulls, which is my good friends Aidan and Fabeku. Way back when we were hanging out in the lost continent of Atlantis, we started this occult rock band and recorded a bunch of episodes, which there'll be a note in the show links for it. You can find all of them. We've had a variety of supporting band members over the years in our conversations, but today we're going back to the original lineup, to the three of us who are still podcasting and doing stuff. Of course, we always send our love to John, who was one of the also original band members who stepped back to focus on other areas. We don't want to not acknowledge him. And our last episode was in June of 2021, came out. And so I thought it'd be a great place to start. Let's catch up again. Given that maybe everybody hasn't listened to our entire discography, let's do a real quick, who are you? And then we'll get into what's going on these days. You want to go first, Fabeku?
Sure. At this point, probably the easiest way to describe who I am is I'm an artist who sometimes does other stuff. Some of that other stuff looks like teaching and consulting and all of that. My background, lifelong student of occult stuff, practice and initiated into Orisha practice and traditional lineages, which at this point is kind of my main focus. And that's it. That's what I got.
Aidan?
I'm in such a transitionary phase. Who knows? My current joke is that, my name is Aidan and my pronouns are optional. They can be either it or that or yes and. Lifetime magical practitioner at this point. I'm kind of playing with this intersection of animism and a particular set of practices that have been given to me by my allies and my ancestors. And we're really just kind of hyper-focused on that at this point. I've got a few books out, and I'm working on another one that will be more focused on what I just said. Yeah.
Nice. Well, yeah. And for folks who maybe aren't so familiar with me, I'm Andrew. I like everybody, have been practicing magic since the Pangea split into separate continents. Did a big tour through ceremonial magic and all sorts of things. Have been really blessed to have access to a lot of amazing magical teachers and community members and elders of one stripe or another who've shared a lot of different things with me. Also practicing traditional Cuban lineage of Orisha stuff, which is generally my personal focus these days. I've been card slinging for folks since 2000 and running my store, and there's a lot of things that kind of come with that. But also, in a big phase of transition right now. So, it's interesting how the three of us have kept in contact for sure, but, stuff is changing. And I guess, maybe let's start there. What's going on with all the change? What's different? Where are you feeling pulled?
I first have to just throw out there for all of the younger folks listening that you get, I mean, I know it just sounds like cranky old man shit, but magic was way cooler in the late Cretaceous.
It's true. It's true. Yeah.
And so
Although
we have to get that out of the way if we seem snobby.
We still seemed, yearning for when all magic was ocean magic. You know, I mean that's the real classic, right? And,
exactly.
You know, I mean, I yearn for those secret lost texts written on algae of yore. You know.
Sigils and stromatolites. That's what it is, kids. Sigils and stromatolites.
Yeah, the fossils just don't do it justice, you know. Yeah. So in case you don't get it now, none of us take anything too seriously, right? Like it's, you know, that is not where we're coming from, you know. Or maybe more so. I've been often using this tagline around like the presence of the shop in the world, which is serious but not pretentious, right? Like, you know, very serious about the stuff we carry and providing, you know, sincerely genuine items and magical practices and advice and all those things. But I'm like, it doesn't matter to me. Is this your first candle you're buying? Is this your 100,000th candle you're doing something with? You know, are you cranking out your full Abermelon working and doing stuff every day for the next 6 months in a cave in the hills? Fantastic. Are you like just giving a little hat tip to the ancestors every so often? It's all good, right? Like Absolutely. We're where we're at and we're doing what we're doing, and yeah, it's not comparative or any of those things.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could start there, I guess. I'm not sure how I would describe it, except that it's kind of a combo of what we just were talking about. That I don't take kind of how I'm perceived is not a big thing to me. I don't take kind of the identity side of magic as seriously at all anymore. It's kind of like, I do what I do. I know what it is. I'm very serious about that. I'm very serious about my connection to what I call the peeps, my allies and my ancestors and the powers that I work with. But I'm not overly serious outside of that. And even within that, I'm foul with my peeps in a way that I'm sure that my devotional polytheist friends would be like actually appalled with if they heard the way that I wander around my apartment talking to them, because it really is like motherfuckers and bitches all the time. But this is what hangs around me, so it doesn't matter. You know? Right. If that's not your jam, you probably aren't in the house, because I'm just like that. I think that there's a big transition going on because of, I think we hit a point in the world where there was a point where people could kind of ignore what's going on in the larger world, and that's kind of passed for way more people than I think it was previously. Like, I think there's always been a kind of push that if we could get back to a slightly better version of status quo, things would be okay. And I think that as that's fallen apart, at least for me and the people that I deal with in the world, we have a lot of kind of, whether it's ancestral or allied, kind of clamoring towards like, maybe you can't fix it, but you got to do something to get involved a little more deeply and try and help people out here. So that's what's changed for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's I don't know how to say. There's a understandable disorientation, right? I think there's a sense of things feel like they've gone so far off the rails and are continuing to go off the rails at a velocity that is alarming at best. And I think people are just super disoriented. Who am I? What do I do? What does it mean? Can I do anything? How do we do anything? Which end is up? You know, all of that. And I think that that's the part that I'm focusing a lot on, is how to get oriented, how to stay oriented to whatever degree that's possible. You know, what does that mean? When we get oriented, what do we do? And for me, the focus on that is largely through spiritual practice, through divination, through art, through community. I mean, all of those things feel, they've always felt important, but now it feels incredibly dangerous to sort of lose focus on any of those pieces right now at all.
Yeah, I definitely agree with all of that vibe.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see that for sure. Yeah, I mean, I've been obviously deeply impacted by world changes and all that jazz that's going on for sure, right? But as a single parent to a kid with a lot of needs, and whom the system, from the school system to other systems, have just failed so much. I've been really spending a lot of time just keeping or attempting to keep equilibrium in these sort of immediate circles, and kind of maybe over the last 4 months since the summer, I've been sort of getting stuff's been getting better and stabler and whatever. And I've been sort of lifting my head up and looking at things and being like, okay, what's going on in the world? Whew, I don't like a lot of it. And I mean, it's not that I wasn't aware, but, but also realizing, where am I at now? Like, I've been reading cards for people as like a major part of my living for 24 years now, and I just sort of had this moment where I started with a small question with a friend in a tarot session. We were looking at some stuff, and he started asking me some questions like, oh man, this is a big shift, and over the last while I've started really shifting a lot of things. And it's not that I don't want to read cards for folks. I love reading cards for folks. But there's a lot of other stuff that I'm working on and I want to work on, and that I need space to really settle into, And so I've been adjusting a lot of things and just kind of looking at like, okay, what was good at one point but doesn't serve me, or what was necessary at one point and doesn't serve me, and it's interesting to sort of go through that and shake up stuff that's just been taken for granted for a while, right? And yeah, I mean, what's the role of that in the bigger world? Well, I mean, returning to podcast is part of it. I think that the podcast is a really beneficial thing in the world, and as I started talking about it with different people, the feedback that I got about returning was just like so wonderful, and and I think that that's a part of where I'm at these days. So yeah.
I hear that a lot. I think, and I have my own version of that. I think there's a lot of people that are thinking, what am I doing? And why am I doing it? And do I want to be doing it? And is this the thing to do? And if it's not, what do I do? And how do I create space to do that when it feels like the whole world is on fire? And again, we're at a velocity that's slightly terrifying on the best of days. And it seems like, there's a lot of rebuilding while the plane is crashing and burning at the same time. It's like the masks have dropped, the doors have opened, the plane's on fire, we're 10,000 feet from the ground, and now we get to create an entirely new thing, hopefully, before we hit the ground.
Right? Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's super interesting, too, thinking about it that way, because, Fabeku, like you guys and I, we've all talked about this privately, but, I had this massive crash and burn shortly after the last book came out that was really kind of like the predecessor to this kind of period of time. I can kind of look at it now. I can kind of go like, I credit, for anybody not knowing kind of the most recent forms of me, but I credit the allies and the ancestors for my ability to function. Very much so. I'm not here alone, and thank God. The gods, whatever you want to call that thing. But I really do feel like they were kind of like, you gotta finish up some shit that you started a million years ago, back in the late Cretaceous. Uh, and you got to finish that so that you can be in a position to kind of ride what's coming. Because if I had had that same kind of period of kind of my personal crash and burn right now, it would have been very unpretty, even less pretty. And part of that has been that push for me of figuring out, what do I do now in the sense of community, in the sense of being out in the world. I have never been comfortable with the concept of being a teacher, even though I've kind of known that that's what I do.
Yeah.
And a lot of things kind of conspired to go, suck it up and get on with it. And so it's been figuring out, how do I generate platforms in the modern world that work for me to do that thing? And how do I get clear enough that people know what they're getting? Because I am not for everybody. Like, I am the least. Like, you want outlines, you want syllabus, who are you even talking to, people?
That's right.
Like, get real. That is not my universe. But if those things have never made sense to you either, we should talk.
Yeah. Yeah. Go outside, find some dirt you like, start talking to it.
See what happens.
Put some in your pockets and see where you go.
Put some in your pockets, put some in your mouth.
Yeah.
Figure out, don't stick the rocks up your nose. Ask me how I know.
Right. Make sure you have some tweezers. Yeah. Yeah. I've been thinking about my role in the tarot world more than anything else, and I'm generally not a fan of this term, and I'm never gonna go around and be like, Andrew McGregor, tarot master, Andrew McGregor, whatever, right? Like, I don't know, but at the same time, I look at kind of who are the tarot people I'm friends with, who do I talk about tarot with, and who comes to me to talk about tarot. And I do mean like clients, but mostly I mean like, in the bigger tarot world, right? And I was talking to a friend of mine the other day, and she's like, well, you're a tarot elder now, right? And I'm like, huh, yeah, maybe, I guess so. Okay, sure. And thinking about that, thinking about those kinds of things has reorientated some of what I'm doing, especially because I tend to just be real focused on what's in front of me and not looking at the bigger picture, and kind of around the same time I was on one of the socials and scrolling through stuff, looking at what's going on, and there's all these people talking about authors and author this and writing books, and I was like, oh yeah, I wrote 3 books. I guess I'm an author. And it's such a funny thing to sort of, because I think, to some extent, like both of you, I kind of hold a lot of this stuff fairly loosely, I do stuff, I make stuff, I put it in the world, and I make more stuff, and I work with people, and I just keep going, But it's like when you turn around and be like, huh, I made 5 Oracle Tarot decks of cards. I wrote 3 books. I'm currently working on 2 separate decks, and I've got like 3 books I'm thinking about writing. I'm like, huh, I guess I got a lot to say at this point, And like, I don't know if other people, this is not like braggy. This is like truly surprising to me in some ways. Even if you had asked me and I'd be like, oh yeah, blah, blah, blah. But like, it's such a strange thing. And I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just a thing about me, but I feel like it's also something about what's going on at this time. This sort of reorganization of myself in the world that highlights a different kind of picture.
It's interesting because it made me laugh as you were talking, because a couple months ago I released a book that I spent most of the year making, and in my mind, somehow as I was doing it, it felt like the first book. It's the 6th book I've done. It's
right?
the sixth book. And literally until I was right at the end of that, in my mind, I'm like, oh, cool, I'm putting a book out. It's like, hey, dummy, you've done 6 books. This is not the first book. But I think in some ways, for me, I think that piece you said about you just keep making stuff and keep going. Like I don't build a foundation on 6 books. It's like, this is the thing I've done. This is the thing right now that feels the most relevant and important and useful and meaningful. And that's the focus. It's not, I don't know. And in some ways it feels good not to wrap my identity up in that stuff in ways that, because I mean, yeah, I mean, in some ways, who cares that I published 6 books? I mean, and at the same time, I also think it's interesting the point you made, because increasingly people have been using that term elder in relation to me, and I'm always like, who are you talking about? And then I'm like, oh right, I have done this for a minate. Like I've been around for a second, and I'm getting
Talking
older.
about that silver fox over there.
Right. Right? That's the thing. So it is that interesting kind of paradox of, oh yeah, I've done a bunch of stuff, and I don't really think about it a lot. Not really, anyway. I mean, I'm proud of it, but I don't, like I said, it took me a minute to realize this is book number whatever. I'm just focused on what's the next thing, and how do we do it? What does it do? Why are we doing it? What's the use of it? So,
Yeah.
Yeah, I had 2 pieces that are related to that recently, and I've been seeing the somatic therapist for the last year and a half, almost 2 years now, and who's been amazing and has really helped me out in a ton of ways. And the teaching thing has come up, and I've discussed my discomfort with it as a title and all this. I was like, I don't really like it. I never have, probably because I was terrible in school and didn't really like my teachers, and for nothing more advanced than that. But and we had this conversation, and she was kind of like, you really need to look at that. And within a couple days, I was listening to a podcast that I'd recorded with Leanne Brooke Tyler, who's got a podcast called Be Mythical that I've been a guest on for years. And she records the introductions after you record. And so I would just throw this thing on because I usually don't remember what I've talked about a couple months later. And then it comes up and people will write me or whatever and say, hey, could we talk about this? Or what's up with this? So I usually will listen to them once, like on the day that they release, if I get them. And I'm listening to this thing and she's like, he's a teacher, he's a healer. And I'm like, what the fuck? And it was actually really funny because the fact that she used healer, which was so over the top to me, completely allowed me to just kind of go like, teacher is fine. Yeah, I'm okay with it. Right?
Side by side, I'll take door number 1.
give me 10 years. Maybe I'll take some ownership of healer at that point.
And then when the next time we got together, like 6 months later, I told her about this. 3 months later, and she was like, I called you a healer. That's in your bio, right? Because I usually just read the stuff from your bio. I'm like, oh, hell no, it's not in my bio. That's funny. And she's like, I've read all your books and we've talked a lot. Can you actually state that is not like a large part of the focus of your work is on healing work? And I was like, oh, fuck you. I hate you, Leanne, Yeah. And so some of it is coming into real kind of acceptance when we're not, I think, people who super identify with this. There's a lot of people who I think it's really important for them to have that author title or that healer title or whatever, master tarot reader title. And I don't think any of us really are there, probably because we're all kind of goofballs and we know it. And it's funny because it's like then shortly after that at my therapist, I was talking about something and she's like, well, you're 57. You've been at this forever in this lifetime. And you're kind of entering that elder phase. I was again like, seriously? Will you
Come on.
all stop on this shit?
Yeah.
But it's also not wrong. And so it's a funny phase. I mean, that's definitely some of where I'm at now. So, I keep kind of getting pushed in those directions. It's like, as soon as I kind of said, maybe I could do this live, like I do it online. And the next day I was invited to a conference to teach in 2026. And I'm like, okay, 2026, that means I have time to practice. I could figure out how to do this live before I'm at some event with people that theoretically know who I am and
100%.
are expecting me to be able to talk in front of people and not be a complete babbling idiot.
Well, maybe this is a good question for us to talk about. So, what would it mean to you to be an elder? What kind of elder are you? What would change about the way in which you are being in the world if you took ownership of that? Aidan's, I'm not sure, flipping me off, flipping off both of us, flipping off the whole world.
I didn't say anything. It has to be you. It wasn't me.
Yeah, it must be me. Sorry. For those listening, Aidan just gave me double birdies. So yeah. Well, in that case, maybe we'll make Fabeku answer first. What would it mean to you?
So clearly, Aidan is the smarter of the two of us, because if I'd have known that, I would have flipped you off too. I think to me at this point, my focus is on. My focus has always largely been on community, but that's the main thing. Which, that in and of itself is a complex thing for all kinds of reasons. But it feels like an inconvenient place to focus, and it feels like probably the only smart place for me to focus at the same time. At least the main place, because I'm not sure how we navigate stuff in the absence of it, And I think that a gathering of bodies is not a community. I don't think those are the same things. And I think that we need functional or semi-functional communities at least. And so my focus is on what does that look like and what does it mean and how do we do it? And, the other part of it is more loudly and more obnoxiously than ever, kind of advocating for artists and art. And when I say art, I mean all forms. I don't just mean it in the way we usually think about it, but, in all of the ways, and getting it out in the world and doing things with it and using art as for all of the things that it can be, saving people's lives and shifting things and destroying things and building things and all of it. Yeah. To me, that feels... It almost feels, and that's, again, largely been true, but especially recently, it feels like anything else is just kind of playing games while the house is burning down. It just seems like a poor investment of energy for me to do other stuff. And so those things have become even more urgent than they have been. So,
yeah, I can see that, right? Yeah. I think that one of the things that sort of this transition that I'm going through right now is what is the best use of my time and energy?
Yeah, for sure.
Right? Like what is the thing that's going to, most support me doing my work, most support my family, most support the people who I'm going to work with, and really sort of looking at the stuff that interferes with that and being like, I'm just not doing it anymore. That's it, Like one of the big things that I dropped was I no longer take walk-in clients. 24 years, I took walk-in clients. If I'm at the shop and I'm available and someone comes in, I'll read for them. And, I was like, I can't do this anymore. People got to book a day ahead now. And it's created, it's more about the like cognitive shifting and the sort of lack of ability to plan than anything else, and I'm just like, I can't do that anymore. I don't want to do that anymore because I have a lot of work to do and I have a lot of deep work to do and I don't want to get disrupted by that, Yeah. So,
for sure.
Yeah. What about for you, Aidan?
For me, it's, it is interesting because it's interesting to me on a few levels, which is one that, again, I'm a good bit, not a huge bit, but a good bit older than both of you. And so it's not like I have like an impending sense of my doom, but it's an awareness. You go, oh, I'm not going to really be here for that much longer compared to how long I've been here already. I am not in midlife.
Yes.
God help me if I die at 114. I don't want that to happen. Take me about 25 years earlier than that, and I'm okay. So that I think is definitely a piece, because inside I don't feel that. Inside I feel like I'm somewhere between 17 and 30. That's that. There's some part of me that never has grown up in a way. In the way that I think our culture tends to age people. I don't think a lot of that happened to me. Different stuff did, but so there's that piece. And then coming out of, again, my breakdown was about that. It's like I was trying to get I was trying to put more distance between me and what I do with all of the allies and peeps and ancestors and magic than I had before, for a bunch of reasons. And they basically said no, which I'm really thankful for, because it wasn't the right move. And they were really like, I told somebody the other day that they were pretty much like, you asked for all of this, and if you try and walk away, we'll just crack you open like a walnut. Like, you're gonna figure out that that's not the right decision. And I did. And coming back from that, it's been this couple of year process of going like, and it's kind of tied into what Fabeku said in particular, of like, what's the most useful thing I can do? Like, I have always done this for a different purpose than a lot of the people that I know in the communities that I've been in. I've always been driven by some different things. And the clearer that gets, the more it's like, what do you want me to do with the folks that work through me and with me, meaning the spirit side of things. And they're very clear. They're like, make space for people that are kind of on the same line as you, and get really unapologetic about what you don't care about and what you're not focused on, and go really hard at what you are, and also to kind of overcome my shyness and introversion to kind of hunt down some folks that I really do appreciate and go, hey, I really appreciate the work that you're doing. And some of that has just been cool, thanks. And some of that has opened up some new friendships and some new kind of lines of things for me to look at. And so if there's an elder aspect of that, I think it's really just like settling in to like, this started when I was a kid. It has not gone away. I'm not here forever. So what matters? And I'm going to focus on what matters. And really try and, what you were saying, Andrew, like really decenter what doesn't to the maximum extent that I can.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, for me, one of the things too has just been like revisiting what is the way in which I'm going to work, right? And what is how I show up, and to an extent also what am I asking and expecting from folks who want to show up in my world, and especially as time goes on in the whatever social media iteration we're living these days, and like I look at so many interactions and all these kinds of things, and I'm kind of like, I don't really want like a lot of this. I really want like early days Facebook, like, hey, here's my sandwich I ate, hey, how's it going, look at my dog, like actual commentary and engagement too, as opposed to like I reshared something recently that said something to the effect of one of the worst things about the internet is that it has convinced us that we all need to appear wise. Yeah. And I'm like, yeah, I really feel that solidly, because there's plenty of wisdom, sure, but also like everybody jockeying to show what they know and to this and that and whatever. And I'm just like, oh, I don't want that, and yeah.
Yeah, I think a lot about that. I think that I think when making a way in the world shifted in a way that put all the weight on attention, on getting it, on maintaining it, on stoking it, on, I think it's broken us. I mean, I think
Yeah.
it's broken everybody, right? It's all of the people whose attention people are chasing are exhausted because everybody's trying to get their attention. The
Yeah.
people that are doing the chasing are exhausted because that's all they feel like they can do is try to keep dancing on stage to maintain or get attention.
Yeah.
And it's also led to largely meaningless shit. You know, like I said, I would rather see a photo of somebody's dog than some trash post that says nothing that somebody's throwing up. They know it says nothing and they're putting it up because they need to feed the algorithm to keep their shit in people's faces. It feels, I think what I'm feeling a lot lately is I'm thinking about all the ways that we've lost our humanity, right? The way we engage each other, the way we engage the world, we engage ourselves, the way we build businesses and make businesses and market, all of it. It's like there's such a loss of humanity in a way that, I don't know, it feels, I don't know, it feels like everybody's running around doing a thing we were told to do. Nobody wants to do it. Nobody's digging it. It doesn't feel right to almost anybody. And yet we're all running around trying to smile and nod and act like we're into this shit. I don't know anybody who's into it. I mean, well, some, but very few people that are into this shit, you know, and it's fatiguing. And to me, like you said, show me a picture of your dog. Tell me, tell me what song are you loving right now? What did you make for dinner last night? You know, what's the last poem you read that matters? Show me the art that made you cry or laugh or something. Just give me some kind of human thing. I don't need your latest hot take on some shit that nobody cares about. You know, I just, who cares? Just be a human being.
I already blocked the phrase hot take and unpopular opinion on the platforms that allow me to block such things, you know?
Smart.
You know? Yeah. Well, it's funny too, right? Because, you know, it's end of year time. And so like all the different platforms are kicking up analytics of, you know, from my rapped music to my whatever. And, you know, I use like pretty popular social media posting software, right? I'm not a fan, but I'm also not a huge fan. So whatever, it doesn't matter who it is, right? But like they sent me this thing and they're like, you posted blah, 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 blah. You're in the top 5% of everybody using our software. And I just stopped for a minute and I'm like, wow, that's wild to think about. Because this, and it's wild to think about because I posted 1,200 posts last year, but that's across Facebook. That like each post that goes to a different location is counted there, right?
Right.
So that's Instagram, Twitter before I stopped posting there, Pinterest, and Instagram, right? So that means that probably I posted like 250 to 300 posts last year, which is still quite a lot, you know. But like I run a store, right? Like posting for a store is a lot more straightforward than maybe other things because I'm like, look at this cool stuff I got in. Look at this cool stuff I got in. Have you seen this other cool thing? And, you know, but like there's this notion that we need to post 3 times a day and blah, 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 and all this stuff. And there's so much dialogue around what we should do, right? And this dialogue around doing more and doing more and doing more. And to what end, right? Like, I think that we've conflated this sort of question of if you want to be an influencer, that's one thing. But if you want to just do something else, it's apples and oranges. Those two conversations don't belong together, but it's hard to keep a perspective on that, you know?
Yeah.
Well,
It's super interesting too. And this is a super quick one, but like I just updated my website for the first time in like 5 years. And so I switched from the older version of Squarespace to the new one. And as you're doing it, you know, they're giving you prompts to like help you do it right. They're like, so do it like this so that you don't fuck up your standings for your SEO standings. Right. And I'm like, oh, just I ignore. I don't care.
Yeah.
You know? my SEO standings do not affect my life at all.
Yeah.
Like, this is just out there so that if people do go looking, they find kind of a central point. But I'm not trying to be first in anything on Google unless you search my name, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, right? I mean, I see every day there's artists that are talking about, I can't paint because I have to be a content creator now. I can't write my art, my poetry, my book. I can't do my shit because I've got to post on Instagram 800 times a day now. And it's like, well, actually, you don't. And I think that's like, that's the weird thing, right? Like, we've fallen into this thing. There's so much volume behind 3 times a day, 3 times a day. At some point, it's like, that's one game. You can play it, and you can also not play it. And you can play a different game. And you can still play a different game and do your thing in the world and be fine. Yeah. And I think that's, again, to me, that's part of the loss of humanity. That so-and-so said I need to post 3 times a day, every day without fail so that Instagram loves me. And then I can't do any of the shit that I care about because I'm doing that. It's like, well, there's other options.
Yeah.
There's other options.
And it's also interesting because you guys have been around the social stuff actually for longer than I would have. I think I got started on it later because I was out in the woods. But, it's also like, do you remember how every fucking thing that you would see was like, here's how to get to 6 figures?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, that's not something you really see anymore, but at least I don't. But it seems like that to me. It's like, there's this super weird thing. It's like there's like an MLM side of it, to this whole thing, that it's like, okay, are you looking at content creators who are anything other than influencers of other content creators as a business, versus somebody who actually is doing something different than that? Because your approach is can be incredibly different, like you said. Like, I very rarely post anything related to what I do business-wise, even though I do this stuff. This is how I make a living, essentially, at this point. But it's not based on that. It's not based on my Instagram popularity. Yeah. You get videos of me feeding my squirrel and shit like that, because that's what I would like to see. So that's what I'm going to share.
Well, and I think, there's such an interest in being the best, being the top notch, and all that kind of stuff. And, I think it's most obvious in my like easy to talk about in my rock climbing life, So I've been rock climbing since sometime towards the end of the 90s, on and off. Big break when I had a kid, break for other reasons along the way. But especially increasingly, maybe over like the last 8 years, I've been doing a lot of it, and it's because I like it. It's because I have fun at it. It's a great thing. I get to share it with my youngest, who likes to climb. And on the one hand, it's really great because I'm actually climbing at a higher level than I've ever climbed before, which is fun because it's a puzzle and it's a thing to play with, and it's a thing to try and understand what my body does and what the wall's doing and whatever. But I listened to this podcast, and I'll see if I can dig it out and put it in the show notes as well. And they were talking about the aggressiveness of the language of people around completing their climbs, right? You crushed it, you killed it, blah, blah, blah. It's like being in a war, going up this wall, and I'm like, yeah, I don't want any of that, And I listen to a variety of climbing podcasts, and it's tangentially interesting what the best people in the world are doing, but they're just so far removed from my experience or wherever I'm going to continue to climb at. Even if I continue to improve for the next 20 years, I will never be climbing the hardest climbs in the world. It'll just never happen. And I don't care, right? And so I like to refer to going climbing as getting my wigglers on the wall, get my fingers on the holds, right? I started referring to me and my kid Irene went through a big time of sort of experimenting with different ways of describing, finishing a climb. And because I boulder, and sort of completing a boulder usually involves putting two hands on the last hold. We refer to it as booping its snoot. We also refer to it as buying it flowers or getting a hug from the wall, and we just shift away from that stuff, right? And it's just like, I'm not interested in, I'm not motivated by being the best in the world. I'm motivated in something that's much closer to the felt experience of doing the climbing. And that also kind of describes where I'm at when I'm working with folks, right? I'm so in the present and engaged in that moment. It's not about anything else, right? And even when it comes to like the businesses and all this kind of stuff, I remember the days when everyone was like talking 6-figure income and this and doing all that stuff. And I think that still goes on in a variety of corners for sure. And then I met a bunch of people from within the tarot communities who were, I know a lot of the sort of most famous folks around, right? And it was interesting how many of them, and this is no diminishment of their knowledge or skill, had jobs, had a partner who supported this thing, and or like you say, that some of the folks are just like multi-level marketing, right? Buy my course to teach you how to do this stuff, and you too could make 6 figures because I'm making 6 figures teaching people how to make 6 figures, right? And yeah, it's just sort of, it's an interesting shift for me to really just not be that interested in any of those things. And kind of to what Aidan was talking about sort of like, well, in the time that I have left, what do you want? I'm like, I want to spend my time climbing with people I like, having fun, getting outside, making art, writing some books, and, whatever else. But like, it's not this sort of big impetus to be the best or to be attached to those ideas, and even to sort of show people that stuff. I just want to invite people into my process almost, It's kind of what this episode is. Like, you're all invited into our processes here. Mm-hmm. I hope you enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, well, fair enough. Go tell somebody else.
Well, what's interesting is that I know so many people, whether it's clients or friends, who have done all the stuff. They did all the stuff they were supposed to do and told to do, and some of them are the most famous people in their industries, and they built big things and made tons of money, and then they come to me and say, I'm miserable, I hate it, I don't want to keep doing it, I'm going to have a breakdown, help me burn this down and build something else.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's not a one-off thing. It's happened more times than I can count in the last couple of years. And I think about in my own life, my dad died when he was in his early 50s when I was a kid. I was like 18 when he died. And, all he ever wanted to do was make art. He didn't make art. He worked a fairly high-level corporate job that he hated and was miserable in and was miserable to be around, and then dropped dead. That was it. And as I approach 50, I think, what matters? Like what Aidan was saying. How much time do I have left? What do I want to do? What do I care about? It's not how many Instagram followers can I get. I don't care. Mm-hmm. It doesn't make any difference to me. Have I made the art that I care about? Have I supported other artists? Have I built communities? Have I done something that lets somebody that is alone in the world know that they're a little less alone? Cool. Yeah. That's great. The rest of it, I honestly don't give a shit about any of it.
Yeah.
At all.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, it's also interesting, and this is just, I had a random thought that kicked in that and Andrew may not even know about this, but like a lot of what's going on in the United States is like a direct side effect of this change in corporate law called Citizens United, that basically said that corporations were allowed freedom of speech in the same way as an individual, which essentially allowed them to be duplicitous in the same way as an individual, which didn't used to be the law. And it also allowed them to throw tons of money into politics, right? But I was thinking that one of the side effects of kind of the internet becoming the root of so much of people's livelihoods is it's also kind of forced people to turn themselves into that corporate entity, which isn't really good for us. I mean, yes, it might help you make a living, which is needed, but it's not great for the spirit. And it's funny because it's like I was talking to somebody recently about, they said, you have like kind of they're commenting on my kind of obsession that I think that even though things were fucked in a gazillion ways, as they always have been, because we're humans, but like if you go back a couple hundred years, things were different. And it's because we didn't have these crazy expectations. It was kind of understood that if you could make a living and feed yourself and your people and take care of your people, you were doing good. Mm-hmm. You didn't have to be the best at something. You didn't have to be known. You didn't have to be famous. You didn't have to be a celebrity. And I think that we have to find a way for folks to realize that this kind of thing that's presented as the answer is just one answer. It's not the answer. It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, I think that idea of people feeling like, I mean, even using the language that they're a brand and they have to stay on. You're a human. You're not a brand. I mean, I guess you can be, but then you turn yourself into this kind of one-dimensional, caricaturized version of yourself. And going back to what I said a minute ago, a lot of the people that I know that have built these 6, 7, 8-figure businesses have done that, and then they feel the weight to continue that game, and they don't want to. They can't. The money isn't worth that. Trying to pretend that there's something that they're not, or some version of themselves that they're not, and somehow that's not only become normalized, but that's become the advice.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you think? Again, it works in a short-term way, but how do you ever sustain that? And I don't know many people. I mean, there are people, but I don't know many people who do or would want to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and I think that, a lot of stuff has gotten sort of nudged in the wrong way. And I think, like a lot of people, it's like, well, you should be a brand. I mean, well, you are to some extent a brand regardless, right? But what are you going to do with that, and how are you going to do it, right? And the thing that's, like, not that I think I'm perfect at any of these things, but like the choice that I've always made is I want to be the same everywhere.
Yeah.
Because when people meet me, I want them to feel like there's no disconnect from their experience of listening to my podcast and seeing me on the internet or watching me teach or, any of these things. And, to me, that is super helpful, right? But yeah, I mean, I could, I've been thinking about, like, what do I want to share? And I'm reminded of a time I was hanging out with a friend, and he was like, "Hey, Andrew, what initiations do you have in these, like, esoteric and Masonic type things?" And and so I told him. He goes, "Oh, okay." And as a lark, he went through and made a list of all of the titles, right? And he, over some drinks, he thought it was really funny to read them all to me, right? And it's a long list, but I'm like, but also whatever, right? Like, it's not, it's amusing, right? It's not the thing. It's not me, right? And I think that, maybe there is a piece that's sort of tied to a lot of bigger stuff for me, or bigger ways of being in the world. I've been sort of sitting with gender stuff again, and what is going on with what do I feel about my gender? What do I want to share about my gender? What am I interested in the world about that, and like, there's a way in which I'm often misperceived to my own inner experience, and I remember an early conversation with my partner where she's like, well, but you like, you dress masculinely. And I'm like, well, I dress androgynously like a punk rocker. I'm like, okay. They're like, well, what about your mustache? I'm like, well, my handlebar mustache is a hat tip to surrealism. Like, there are these ways in which people perceive these cues, and they're not, I'm not saying that they're wrong, or they're off, but there are ways in which, to me, they don't mean the things they mean to other people. And, what do we do with that is also interesting, because I think it leads to a lot of my general apathy about titles, identity. I've actually, for a long time, I used to say that my gender was delicious and my orientation is delicious, because I am delicious and I like people who are delicious. And that's really all I need to know. More recently, because a lot of language has shifted, and new options have emerged, and one of my kiddos said to me a little while ago, they're like, maybe you're gender apathetic, Dad. Maybe that's your thing. And I'm like, that is a great one. I am gender apathetic.
I right? think that's. I think I'm with you on that one. I think I am highly gender apathetic. Like, I just don't know. It's not really important to me.
Yeah. Right?
I used to try and figure it out. That really never happened.
Yeah.
After a while, I got bored.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, none of this is to dismiss folks for whom gender is super important, because
hell no, yeah,
awesome,
yeah,
possum,
not at all.
I love all the folks in all the ways.
Yes.
But I think there is a piece where, I think that maybe all of us to some extent are kind of like, meh, about some of these things, where it's, for me, I'm curious about the persons I'm hanging out with. I'm curious about the experiences of people I'm working with. I'm curious about the things that I'm just straight up curious about. And I'm not really looking to get anywhere or reach a definition or any of those kinds of things about it. To me, it's just a process of trying to be present and engaged,
Yeah, and I talk about it in the book some too, that I'm working on now, and I've talked about it before, but like the first thing that ever made sense to me in that context was the first time that I really kind of like identified as non-binary.
Yeah.
And I realized that that's like a really core thing to me. And and again, with you, I absolutely support anybody's position wherever they find themselves, and that changing over time as well. But I realized that that's kind of my thing, is I'm kind of not into binary anywhere. And it's because I see it so much as being like a control mechanism. Mm-hmm. Like, if I got to be good or bad, how do I do that? Because there's things that are pretty on the edge. And if I do some of those, am I now bad? I don't feel like I'm bad, or worse, when I was younger, I did feel like I was bad. And so when I first kind of came across that concept around gender, it kind of immediately expanded out into everything else for me, because that's the way that my mind works. And I was kind of like, yeah, like I know I'm not standard American male, but I don't feel like I'm not in the right body. That's just not an identity that makes sense to me. I have kind of like, I think I have like modern human dysmorphia. Mm-hmm. Like, I think I'm really some forest creature from several thousand years ago that got trapped in this human body and is doing the best they can. That's what I got going on. And that's real. That's not a joke. But if it's kind of like, yeah, it's like everything being on this light switch of the light is on or the light is off. It's like, well, that would be a sketchy fucking way for the world to work if you're driving down the highway and it's noon and then it's midnight. Like, your little light sensors, they would have had to figure that out when they first invented cars, or everybody would be dead. So. But it would work now. But not in the 60s.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like that's such an interesting thing because it leads to so much polarization, obviously, because that's the point of it. And that's where I'm like super not down.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where it's kind of an interesting thing. And maybe for me, that's part of that elder thing too, is like really getting comfortable with like, I'm not down with that and I don't have a solution.
Mm-hmm.
But I can state that I'm not down with it and I'm interested. But I also don't necessarily believe that there is a solution to that. It's just there's different ways of being, and different ways of perceiving. And that's what I'm interested in. And so, like you said, I don't really care about your spiel. I want the people that I'm interested in are the people who I can kind of, to be like grandiose in this, all that I can see their hearts or I can see their soul when I interact with them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And other than that, I'm not too concerned. It's like, yeah, there's shit you can do that I won't hang around with you. But if I can see that, that's what I'm really interested in.
Yeah. It was my birthday not too long ago, and had a party. It was great, and I got what I get is the consistent feedback from after I have a party, which is like everybody there was so nice.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to all sorts of people, and like I got my friends from climbing, and I've got my friends from the coffee shop, and I've got friends from the spiritual community and wherever, right? Like people, and it's because I wouldn't necessarily have put it the way you put it, but I think it's kind of the same thing. They have a good heart, they're kind, and they're open and interested in connecting.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of overlap that we have on a specific topic or many topics or whatever is so much less relevant than how they are as a human being and their kindness and their engagement, And like my kids are at the party, and I know that number one, they've met all of these people at various points, but any of these people would just sit down if they ended up sitting beside one of my kids, they'd be like, "So, what's going on? What's exciting? Tell me things." And they would just engage, and they're not there, like for whatever other reasons, which is fine if that's your thing too, right? But like they're just genuinely interested in other people. And to me, that's the real magic, right? And I think that that's the kind of, to some extent, almost the counterpoint of identity in some ways, right? I do have identities for sure, and I do have things that, would fall outside of what I'm interested in or available for or whatever. But I think that sort of openness to connection and kindness, to me, that's the thing that I'm invested in looking in. And everything else, I'm like, meh, whatever. We'll find stuff to talk about. It'll be good, Yeah.
I feel like lately, all I've wanted to do is get people together and make food and talk.
Yeah.
Just human shit. Just bring your favorite food. Tell me why it's your favorite food. Hang out. Be a human being. That's it. That literally, because I think it's exactly that. Like not too long ago, somebody came to the house to do a repair thing, and we were talking, and they very casually mentioned that they did photography as like just a hobby, and I was like, oh shit, tell me about your photography. This dude immediately like pulls out their phone and spends forever showing me picture after picture, and it was one of them. I'd never met them, had no idea, but it was the most human moment of this person who was there to do a thing and casually mentioned the thing they love, and given the opportunity, just turned into a completely different, complete person, being able to show these beautiful photos that they've taken wherever in the middle of some beautiful. It was amazing.
Yeah.
And to me, I'm like, this is the shit that matters.
Yeah.
Just human people being human people together. That's it.
All right, tell me, at this potluck of yours, what are you cooking, Fabeku?
What am I cooking? Okay, so I've been playing around with these kind of wacky meatball combinations, right? So my current favorite is and this sounds a little out there, but my current favorite I make a beef meatball with chimichurri and blueberries in it.
Okay.
Right?
Ooh.
Something about the basil and the blueberry. Initially, you're like, I don't know about that. But when you taste it, It's amazing.
Nice.
It's an amazing, amazing thing. So I was something with the beef blueberry chimichurri meatballs in it.
I love a good surprise meatball. It reminds me now that it's cold. I should make more of this. I was making mostly chicken meatballs with like a 5-spice kind of thing. And making like a little pho with some noodles and stuff like that. Yeah, for sure.
Right on.
Yeah.
Right on.
How about you, Aidan? What would you bring?
You know, I'm the worst at this because I'm absolutely one of those, like, one of the ways that my neurodivergence comes in is that I'm actually more comfortable eating the same thing all the time.
Yeah.
So
what's your go-to?
My go-to right now is like chicken thighs, usually, because it's juicier than like a chicken breast or something. Usually with like salt, pepper, garlic, and then I have a collection of mostly like Asian influenced spices or sauces in the fridge that I tended to mix up into some strange concoction. Like, this is what it is tonight. Let's see what happens if you add the ponzu to this one. And then let's throw in some Louisiana hot sauce to give it a kick. And maybe some of the gochujang, you know? And if I'm like feeling really wild, I'll have some rice. And if not, I'll just have that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That's fantastic.
I love it.
Yeah. I mean, I love cooking.
It would be like I would bring the strange condiment collection. Like, mix your own. Like, just a bunch of bottles with the labels washed off.
You know what I love about it's one of the things that I love when I go and eat out is that I like places that have a big variety of options.
Yeah.
Of condiments, toppings, you know, like, oh yeah, I would like, you know, like I like those, you go to the burrito bar and it's like, oh yeah, I do want coleslaw on my burrito tonight. I don't know, because it's there and I saw it, right? Like, let's, you know, I'm never going to have that many options at home because that's not how my fridge works. But I love that. And I'm picturing you with a you know, fancy caddy for them all too, right? You know,
that's what I would, if Fabeku was like inviting us over, I would go and acquire the fancy caddy with the unlabeled bottles of sauces.
Perfect.
Like, what are those? It's like, I don't know.
There's
no label. How would I know?
This little spicy, the red one. You know, I think the red one's spicy.
Watch it. Be careful with the ones that are purely red.
Yeah.
Expect vinegar.
Yeah, that's so good. I love cooking, and I love doing a lot of cooking when I have time and energy. So it's kind of hard to pick a thing. But, you know, we're recording just like about a week before Christmas, and, you know, I'll be having folks around the house over the holidays. And I was like, you know what I want to make? I want to make kind of Korean-inspired tacos. That's what I'm going to make. You know, some gochujang and, you know, whatever. Slow cook the beef for a long time. Break out the big cutting board and chop up, like, you know, a bunch of different green onions and, you know, this and that and other things, so people can like assemble what it is that they want. You know, it's like, oh, you don't want it spicy, put some of the sour cream on it. Oh, you want it whatever, you know, here you go, right? And just you know, the prospect of that. And you know, and when I have the time, one of the things that I really enjoy about cooking is those things that take time, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, I could throw this in the Instapot and just like bang it out, but I'm like, no, that's not what's going to happen. Yeah. I'm going to like take it out. I'm going to, you know, saute it and put it in the Dutch oven, you know, and like, you know, do the deglaze the pan and, you know, fry the onions and other things in it, and then just put it on a low heat in the oven for, you know, until we're ready to eat, whatever that is, you know, and just, now I'm getting real hungry. But, you know, yeah, real slow, right? You know, and to me, that's one of the things. And that's one of the things I love about eating with people, you know? Yeah. Like that slowness that can come from it, too. It's like, okay, let's do this. Okay, let's do that. Okay, oh, let's, you know. A mutual friend of ours, Teresa Reed, and I were in New York City a while back. and we literally stopped at like 5 or 6 different places for appetizers. We like have one thing, and then we just be like, all right, that's good for now. Let's go wander around. Let's go see some stuff. Oh, I think there's a taco place over here. Let's go have a taco. Just one, and then like next and next and next. And it's just it's just a way to savor and enjoy life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the most interesting things that I've experiences that I've had food-wise, again, given my proclivities, especially towards being mostly carnivorous, was on the bike trip that I took, which was like 7 weeks in the mountains. Food was extremely sketchy. You would there's a theoretical resupply, and you would roll in, and it's literally like the convenience store in like the kind of sometime scout resort centers, sometimes open to families. Mm-hmm. And they have like Spam and ramen and candy bars. Uh-huh. And you're like, okay, what can I carry? 'Cause I'm on a bike. My bike is already really heavy. What won't go bad? I can't do anything in a can because then I got the can, and just the wondrousness of the incredibly kick-ass New Mexican cuisine in some of those tiny town gas stations, like some of the best New Mexican cuisine I have ever had. Like one place was so good. It was like at a Phillips gas station in this little town. And I rolled in, ate lunch there, and was like, checked their hours and went and got a hotel room across the street. We're like, we're staying here for like 2 days and eating their food. I don't care. I have nothing better to do.
So good.
This is my trip. I'm doing it my fucking way. My legs could use a break. We're eating at this gas station for the next 48 hours. Then we'll leave.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
What did you, how did that trip change you? What came out of that trip for you? Because I know you've been talking about getting out on one of these trips for a long time, and then you did. What came from that?
There were a few things. The first one was realizing that I do much better in things like that when I'm really off the beaten track. The first 3 weeks was not really on a bike route. It was not a route that there was much information on. And that was far and away my favorite part of it. Because I just didn't know. I had no idea what to expect. I learned that after kind of getting used to how heavy the bike was, because I really didn't train for this at all, that like it's really, really fun to ride like a fully rigid bike that weighs 90 pounds down these incredibly rocky, treacherous, rutted mountain roads at breakneck speeds, where you're really like, I don't think I should do this at faster than 30.
Yeah.
Like really just insane. But you realize like this is the best way to do this. Like it's less jarring the faster you can do it, because you're just kind of cruising from the tops of the rocks instead of getting caught in between them. And I didn't really hurt myself after the first week. So as I got good at that, that was awesome. It was really cool to just kind of go like, oh yeah, I can do this. Like, again, I'm 57, and I'm not honestly in that great of shape, and I'm not a serious cyclist or anything like that. So I hadn't camped in 35 years, and I really liked that. One of the biggest things that I got from it was while I was out there on that first part, before I knew I was going to connect with the mountain bike version that runs parallel to the Continental Divide Trail, is I've always kind of separated for the last 20 years my walk around, meet people from my magical life. And I was like, I think I'm done with that. And so it became really funny to have that experience of running into some person. And I didn't do this with everybody because it wouldn't have been safe, but anybody that I didn't think was actually a risk would be like, oh, what do you do? It's like, I write books on magic and witchcraft. And they're like, fiction or nonfiction, which I didn't think would be the response. And so I'd be like, nonfiction, and they would be like, are these like how-to books or about? I'm like, yeah, they're how-to books. And this clearly was not anything most people wanted more information about, but everybody was generally really cool. And a few very surprising people were like, interested, let's talk, and ended up coming up with very cool dream stories, or, prophetic dreams or second sight related stuff. And the second part of that was also doing the same thing. It happened in the same first conversation. I was like, as I'm having this conversation, I'm like, at some point, it's going to come up in one of these conversations about kind of my queer identification, even though I'm generally in heterosexual relationships, and also my neurodivergence. And what do we think about being completely upfront about all of that? And so I was. And that was really fascinating. It was very cool. I had a brilliant meeting out in the middle of nowhere with a crew of thru hikers on the CDT. And it was awesome. It's like, okay, we have this very interesting little crew of queer, trans, neurodivergent people way out in the sticks that have been out here for longer than most people find comfortable.
Right.
And it was just awesome. It was like, I didn't know that when I opened my mouth. And I didn't know what would come out when I opened my mouth. And so it's really been that. It's like kind of what you said. You want to be the same person everywhere. I used to be that. And then about 20 years ago, I stopped. And so it was really a return to that. Like, we're just going to figure out how to have these conversations be real, even if I'm not super comfortable with it.
What brought about you stopping that? Do you remember?
Yeah, I ended up in a corporate environment that was really not cool. It was hyper conservative. Not in the frame that it is now, but that just kind of transitioned to some of the relationships that I had after that. It was also what happened. It happened during my quiet time, where I just wasn't really hunting public information, and so I was still doing stuff, but it was much quieter. And this is also kind of what I realized had led to the breakdown, was that it's like, I can't do that. It's not correct. The vast majority of people I know, and it seems really weird that the people that I'm running into at the gym or whatever don't. And I'm not down,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think about there was a time where I was kind of, through my 20s and into my early 30s, sort of super open with everybody about everything. And it kind of coincided with me for being in a lot of spaces where there was no definitions, right? Like, it wasn't attached to anything, And not that I've sort of like necessarily been super closeted, but like, but yeah, like hang out with people or hang out at the clubs or whatever, where it's like, whatever. Nobody cares about anything, People care about you. People want to connect with you, but there's no like pressure for any particular thing or, need to perform a certain way or be a certain way. And yeah, I've been working on reconstructing more of that, One of the things was inspired by a post you made, actually, Aidan, where you posted about some guy at the gym was wearing a shirt that said "strong and pretty," and I was like, I need a shirt that says "strong and pretty," and so I made one, and I wear it wherever, and it's interesting because like, nobody bats an eye at all, like, it's funny, right? I mean, maybe in some spaces people might bat an eye, but in general, nobody bats an eye, But I do live in downtown Toronto, right? And I do hang out in spaces that are generally more queer celebratory than not, So
that was what was so cool about this trip, is it's like you're rolling through very conservative parts of the country, like rural at best. Like you're in and out of almost not wilderness because you can't have bikes, and designated wilderness, but what most people would think of as wilderness. And so these towns are not progressive in the least. And what I found that was really cool was it's like, and I knew this from my youth, but I've been so isolated in many ways living out in the country as I did for as long as I did. One of like my superpowers is like, I will say the thing that will get somebody to say the thing that they've never said to anybody ever.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of that. And one of the more interesting kind of gatherings that happened, I didn't bond with the cyclists. They tended to be very driven. They were crushing it, but the hikers were not crushing it. They were being crushed and quite open about it. Yeah. And we ended up at one gathering at a hiker hostel, and like bonded with this young woman, and her world kind of blew up right there. And it was really cool to also be talking about maybe elder space thing too.
Yeah.
To go like, hey, you're not totally fucked. Like you're not, you lost your ID, you lost your access to your money, you lost your access to resupply, but there are people here, and I'm one of those people. And so here's a couple $100. Do whatever makes sense, whether that's go home and get new ID, whether that's try and do that through the mail, whether that's just resupply and getting, I don't care. And that was a lovely thing to be in the position to be able to do. And then I think because somebody witnessed that, they kind of came out as having been on the trail for several years, recovering or doing their best because they were not being well served by the VA kind of mental health programs to recover from a couple of tours in the Middle East. They had very bad PTSD, and they realized that they could do the outdoors, but they couldn't really do people. And so I think that they witnessed that piece, and so they began opening up to me. And it was very interesting, the conversation that came out of that, because they were connected to some of the stuff we're connected. They're not as practitioners, but they were just tuned in. Somehow they got tuned in to the kind of otherworld stuff or the spirit stuff. They didn't know what was up there, but they had a lot of stuff going on. And so I spent a lot of time talking to them as well. And again, this is that same crew is all in that place. And afterwards, somebody came up to me and said, you know, you're really fascinating because you like totally were comfortable with both of these situations. You were totally comfortable with this young woman completely melting down, and were able to and knew what would kind of ground her out. You know, and then you were also totally comfortable with this person the rest of us really kind of have been viewing as probably psychotic. And well, what is that? And I said, I don't know. You know, it's just, I can see them and they're the same to me. They're good people. That guy's not psychotic. He's been hurt really, really badly by what he's experienced. And I don't know that he gets back to something where most people will ever be comfortable being around him, but I am. You know, and I'm going to give him all the time I can while I'm here, you know. And to me, it's kind of what you were saying. It's like, that's all that I care about at this point. Is like, how do you, like, I got shit I gotta do because the peeps are on me. And like, this fucking matters. And you're gonna do this. But other than that, it's like, I'm just kind of here for what's present and how do I be as supportive of people? Because it is hard.
Yeah.
And it's, ignoring that it's hard does not help. You know, wallowing in the hardness and kind of glorifying that doesn't either, but I think we have to be able to kind of go, let's figure out how to connect as well as we can in whatever our situation is.
Yeah. You know, and I think that that's like a thing that I know we all do in different ways, you know, and just, you know, like if you're listening to this, like don't underestimate the power of a smile or like
For
looking at
sure.
people, you know?
For sure.
We have a lot of folks in Toronto who drive around collecting beer cans so they can return them and make whatever bit of money, right? And there's this little, like, short, old woman on this, like, kind of kid-sized bike. That's how short she is. And she's got, like, bags and bags of beer cans all sort of tied on and whatever. And she crosses the street right where I am. And I look at her and I smile. And she looks at me and she gives me a polite smile. And then she notices that I'm actually really looking at her. And I really just lean into, like, that smile. And because I could see how tired she was and how, you know, like, she was struggling a bit, maybe physically and whatever. And I just gave her this, like, big, heartfelt, open smile. And then she returned it. And that's sweet and it was nice for me. But even more important, I'm like, I lifted that person's spirit. Maybe for 30 seconds, maybe for 5 seconds, maybe for the next hour. I don't know. But like those human exchanges, that's the magic, right? That's the real jazz, you know? And I think that that's, you know, with all the uncertainty and whatever we're all dealing with these days, that's how we're going to get through that, right? Like, let's lean into that, you know?
You know, as we're talking, I think about probably all have different backgrounds, but similar in some ways, right? I think about growing up, you know, in the punk scene, growing up as an artist, growing up as a occult practitioner, all of it. I mean, I was constantly surrounded by people that could easily be looked at as outsiders and misfits and weirdos, and we were the same and different, but we all just huddled up, and wildly different, and people that were on the fringes and are still on the fringes, and some further out on the fringes than they were, but there was a humanity in that, and to me that was the thing that was normal. There wasn't any real effort, because that was the environment, and I think that builds a certain muscle. Again, if you can maintain that humanity, to smile at that woman on the bike, to talk to that person that other people say is psychotic, to extend that, because that's it. That's the thing. I mean, people literally die in the absence of that.
Yeah.
And if not, we die when we let go of that part of our humanity. That's the thing. I think there's I don't know, there's something really beautiful. I think years ago, I used to work at a piercing studio. I was doing piercing professionally. And, you know, there was an unhoused dude that came in, and I don't even remember what, he needed help with something. And he was covered in these tattoos, and I recognized all these occult symbols on his body. And I said, "Hey, tell me about this tattoo and that tattoo." And he kind of jumped back, and I'm like, "Oh, sorry, we don't have to talk about it." He was like, he was surprised that I even noticed his tattoos. And then we went on to talk, and he was showing me all these tattoos. He got this tattooed because of this daughter and that daughter. And by the time we were done in the piercing room, the guy was in tears because he said, "I haven't had a conversation with anybody in years." In years.
Yeah.
Right? It's like, what?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, that was 25 years ago. I still think about that guy.
Yeah.
I wonder, is he okay? Did he find a place? You know, I still think about that constantly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think about those two people in particular from that trip. They're the two that I'm like, they're absolutely in my kind of prayers to the ancestors and to the allies. Like, let those people be doing good.
Yeah.
Because it's just, it matters. It's all this stuff really matters. And it's also interesting because it's one of the things that it doesn't really matter how it happens. A lot of this stuff happens for me online. More so actually than it does in the real world because I'm not super outgoing, you know, but I've had to learn. Part of that trip was good with that because it did get me to really lean into that much more and be way more open to, like, I think I need to say something here, you know. It's which is an interesting balancing act because again, I'm very aware that I did isolate for about 15 years, and I'm having to learn how to walk out of that the rest of the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'm happy you're walking out this way.
Yeah, sure.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. I miss the days of yore in the Jurassic period, riding the backs of stegosauruses and working our magic with mushrooms that no longer exist,
Exactly, the good ones.
the good ones.
Back when they really did the thing.
If anybody ever tells you that the mushrooms of today are good, you got to check out that Jurassic stuff. Work on your time travel, friends. Work on your time travel. Yeah. All right. Well, maybe this is a good point to put a pause in this ongoing series of conversations that we've had until next time. But let's do the where do folks find you? If folks want to follow up and be more in your orbits, where are you hanging out these days? I'm looking at you, Fabeku.
Fabeku.com, and in theory, I'm on Facebook. Not a ton, but I am on Facebook. And I almost never look at Instagram. And I am on Blue Sky, so there's that.
Aidan?
Yeah, I'm aidanwachter.com, though, and Instagram, Blue Sky, and Threads. But mainly I'm active inside my Patreon now.
Nice. Yeah, well, and I'm at the Hermit's Lamp on pretty much all the platforms. Threads and Blue Sky are the most personal for me. But, I'm kind of the same everywhere, as I said. Also, I've got the shop in Toronto. If you're in Toronto, come by the shop and check it out. And I send shit all over the planet, except for the EU, because they changed the rules and they can't do it no more. But check it out, and we'll be back with more. All right. Thanks for tuning back in, folks.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thank you.